All right, everybody, welcome to the Sentinels of Liberty podcast. I am your host, Redbeard, also known as Jeremy by my first name, my given name. And today I have a great episode lined up for you. I have Rebecca Whiting from the LPMN here to join us and provide some insight, not only just as things are pertaining to Minnesota, but also what she's seen and from her position within the LP here. Kind of in a general sense. And so I'm really happy to have you here, Rebecca. It's going to be a great show. And if you'd like, I'll give you the floor and you're more than welcome to introduce yourself and let people know who you are.
Sure. So my name is Rebecca and I am I am the chair of the Libertarian Party in Minnesota. I've been in this position for a couple of years now. And so this is, I kind of joke like politics is my hobby, because there's other things I'd much rather be doing sometimes, or maybe anyways, but this is what I do. It's kind of a necessity, because you need people that are willing to do what we do. And because it's a labor of love, so a lot of work is put into it. It's a lot of organizing in the background. We're just, I have a team that we're like constantly busy and doing something. So for me, who I am as a person, I have a farm up in Bemidji. We raise dairy cows, pigs, sheep. I do small foods, local, farmers markets, that kind of stuff. That's really like where my heart is. My passion is with the farming stuff and the small family farm, so this morning, we had our farmers market. And so I was up all day yesterday prepping for the farmers market and then did all that this morning and kind of came home. And like Saturday afternoon after the market's over is like my first day and, first time in 3 days that I can just kind of like relax. And I sat down on the couch and I slept for like 2 hours.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, but it's a lot of work, but the farmers market culture and that kind of stuff, I love that kind of thing. So yeah,
that's awesome. And it's great to have it's so good to have like a perspective from somebody who's involved in that realm when it comes to farming and being involved in such a crucial, in my opinion, such a crucial area of society, right? I mean, really, it's not just what you can provide to yourself, but really it's kind of the backbone of what societies are built on in terms of food and keeping everybody going. So I just think that's really cool, honestly.
Oh yeah, because our freedom and who we are as people and our capabilities are completely dependent on where you source your food and what you're able to eat and how well you're able to eat. So I believe in like a local, very small local food culture. But also I believe in decentralizing everything. So, that starts with food, not relying on these giant corporate farms that aren't even in your same region, because the United States relies very heavily on California and Arizona and, Mexico for, being able to provide food. And then you have these huge farms that are hundreds or thousands of acres, big, that they don't really, so there's people have lost connection not with just the land, but, the food as well. So. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. And it's definitely a big deal. And, just on that conversation, we were just talking about before we started, about food freedom. And you kind of said that was a baby of yours that you're trying to kind of cultivate, pun intended. And really trying to get some traction. And so if you want to, I would love to hear about that, as I'm sure a lot of the viewers would too. What is that? What does it all entail? You just kind of want to give us an overview, or wherever you want to take it. So
yeah, sure. So before he was even like really I was just kind of getting my feet wet in the party, and I was involved in another group. And the question was posed to the group, like, what can you do today to help, kind of, fix some of these problems that we have in our legislative system. And, I'd been doing, so we established our farm up here in 2013. And so I've been doing this stuff quite a while. And my dream personally is to have a micro dairy. That's why I raise dairy cows. And right now it's not, Minnesota is just not friendly to, small niche kind of things in farming. And so immediately I was like, oh, well, I can, help fix these raw milk laws.
Yeah.
And so I literally just got on, did some research and realized how good some other states had their laws were for raw milk. And so got all that information and essentially wrote a raw milk bill for Minnesota, and got in touch with my representative up north and was like, hey, this is what I want to do. What do you think about this? And he was like, oh, that's a great idea. And I know now that like he basically took my information and sat on it and everything, that the work that I'd done. Like he'd gone and, well, I guess he'd gone and like talked to went through the Department of Agriculture and got in touch with them about a number of things. So I guess he did do that, but it never progressed past that point. And it took me a couple legislative sessions to realize that there wasn't anything happening with it.
Sure.
So this last legislative session, I had, because of my position in the party now, had access to people and was able to have conversations with them that I hadn't previously had was the possibility.
For sure.
So I was able to get in touch with somebody in both the Senate and the House who were willing to work with me with this information. Now, what had happened, I realized, was that somewhere along the lines, somebody in the Senate had already picked up, so all the work that I had done for the bill and that kind of stuff had picked up that information. And it was kind of neat to see, actually, like when you're working on something, to see your influence on it. So somebody in the Senate had picked up the bill that I had written for raw milk and submitted it, and I didn't even know about it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then, so when I was getting in touch with somebody that was willing to do it for the House, he was like, oh, well, they have this in the Senate. I was like, wait, that's the one I wrote, so like,
yeah,
it was kind of nice. But, the legislation this last year was a disaster.
Yes.
So nothing happened, and I'm not letting it go, because maybe next year. And I kind of joke sometimes that if I'm able to get a micro dairy up off the ground, I might just step out of politics completely, because I really like my cows. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And when I think of legislation or efforts to be able to push something even like raw milk, and you hope that there's some progress that's made. And really, I think the bigger picture too is, okay, if we can get this passed, or if we can at least get it in motion, we can get some teeth into it, what else potentially are we able to push through down the road, and and what else is it that we're able to do or enable to where we can get better food, to where we can get better just general resources in terms of being able to feed people what we have at our disposal, what we see in our supermarkets. And because, it seems, and I don't know a whole lot about it, but just from my understanding, and perhaps you'll be able to speak more to this, but when you look at like the subsidies the federal government provides, well, quote unquote, provides to farmers, a lot of those, especially as it pertains to small farms, is like they're pretty much kind of subsidies that just end up running them out of business. And, it's just like, or just saying, hey, if you don't produce, we'll actually pay you to not produce. And as a result, it creates kind of this, at least to me, it's like an unseen disaster, really. And then you get a couple of years down the road, and then they're asking like, oh, well, like, how did it ever get so bad? It's like, well, I don't know. Maybe, maybe when you start changing hands when it comes to money and farmers and the government, weaseling its way into agriculture, I think you start to see a lot of problems that tend to rise to the surface. And really, overall, it's just pretty antithetical to who we're supposed to be as Americans, right? Like, we're supposed to be there and help each other and be able to trade and sell and purchase goods freely from one person to another. And it just seems that because it's not in the government's interest, they will do whatever they can to stifle or try to prevent that, especially when it comes to the quality of goods, seemingly. So,
yeah, well, there's not any aspect of agriculture that is not overregulated.
Yeah.
At this point, we have created such a system that it's so fragile that, well, we saw it during the COVID lockdowns, like you have supply lines that are disrupted. You have, you're not allowing workers to go to work. You have everything shut down.
Yeah.
But when you're raising livestock, that hog that you're taking to the processor, he wasn't just born and, grown in a 2-week time period. It took months literally to get to where you are. And then beef even longer, because it takes longer to grow out cattle than it does pigs.
Yeah.
It takes months from planting the seed to harvest. So all these things. You can't just stop that and pause it and then just pick it back up where you were, because any point in time during a season that is disrupted, you have lost the entire season.
For sure.
And where we are up north is already the growing zone that I live in, and to some degree you too, is a very challenging area to actually grow in.
Yeah.
Because our winters are so extreme. And it's not just that, it's the winters, it's the land, you can't just, throw seed anywhere and expect it to grow. Like you have to take care of the land and cultivate the land. And then you have to, there's all these things that go into, getting good food from start to finish. So, but there's, the government, not only does it put an extraordinary burden of laws onto a farmer, but also take sugar beets, for instance, the sugar crop is kind of a big thing up here, but they have literally put in place a cap. So once that cap is met, nobody else is allowed to sell their sugar beets. So that's why you have these farmers that's left with all of this stuff that came off of their field because they're not allowed to sell it. Or you have dairy farmers that have a contract with these big commercial dairies. They come and take their milk. They don't see the paycheck for the milk for a couple of months. And B, they don't get any say in what they're forced to accept as payment for the milk. That's why so many dairy farmers are going out of business. And you're expected to work for pennies on a dollar, and they're, long hours, little sleep, high stress. The culture of farmers is one of the highest suicide rates in the United States. And this is why.
Oh, wow.
We had, so when the COVID lockdowns happened, my husband lost his job. And we were looking into going into farming full time. And one of the first things that when we talked to somebody that, was going to kind of help us and figure out which direction we wanted to go, one of the first things he handed us was an 800 number to a helpline on what to do if you start to feel suicidal. Because,
oh my gosh.
the debt that you have to go into
Yeah.
to even become a new farmer. It's the cost of the land. It's the cost of equipment. You're looking at $200,000 at least just for a small tractor with the implements that can make hay.
Yeah.
And, like those big, like pieces of equipment that the big farmers have, you're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And then I know the land up here where we are prior to 2020, it was about $1,000 an acre.
Yep.
Now
I remember that.
$10,000 to $20,000 an acre.
Yeah.
So like to be able to, if you haven't been handed a plot of land that was passed down through your family, and you haven't been handed all of this stuff, then trying to get into this is next to impossible without a substantial financial burden. And not everybody can, for a job that has a lot of risk, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I had always kind of heard about, the suicide rates and all of that, but I guess I didn't realize like how bad it really got to be and where it's at, because it's not one of those professions that you really tend to think of, right, as predominating on that particular scale. But then I suppose it makes sense, because it's, when you look at how much government intervention and how much the government is involved in telling you what you can do, what you can't do, how you can produce it, when where and when, and how you're supposed to sell it, and all of these different factors in there really becomes fairly egregious. And I suppose, it could drive anybody to the brink of insanity. And so there's one, there's a couple comments here, if you don't mind, I'd like to bring up. The first one is from David, and it's something I think that you might be able to speak to, pertaining to the details of the cap and all of that.
So it's essentially a price control thing. Once you've hit a certain amount, they want to be able to control the prices, and you see this in a lot of areas. It's not just like sugar beets or corn or as an example, egg prices. they were literally destroying millions of flocks of chickens, or not millions of flocks, but millions of chickens, under the bird flu. But as what it turned out to be was that they were destroying millions of chickens prior to even like the bird flu being a thing. Sure. It is my opinion, and I might be, I'm a libertarian, so kind of dabble in conspiracies. But I think that they were, used bird flu as an excuse for a practice that they were already doing. And to do, because if you have less chickens and you're producing less eggs, then it drives the cost of eggs up. So that's what we saw, So that's what it is when you're talking about like caps on, this is what you're allowed to sell, this is what you're not allowed to sell. It doesn't matter if you have it and or you have buyers that are willing to buy it. But it's price controls. That's what it is. And that definitely exists in agriculture across the board. So that's one of the reasons I do farmers markets and that kind of thing. It's a rejection of the entire system on the way that it is made, because the system hasn't been created to benefit us. It's been created to benefit them, and so that they have control over what's happening. No,
I think that's a great explanation and overview of how that is. And really, unless you're kind of acting into that farmers market realm, I've come across the occasional headline or article about the farmers that say no. And no usually doesn't work out very well. No usually results in the feds coming to your door and saying, it's one of those weird situations to where it's not exactly at gunpoint, but it's at gunpoint, and they're like, no,
but sometimes it is. I mean, look at the Bundy Ranch, for example. That's a perfect.
I've been there. I met Carolyn Bundy, and or Carol Bundy, and it's nicest person in the world, and yeah, that's what it resulted in, and it's insane to think that we're supposed to live in a country that's free and liberty oriented, but yet you have the federal government coming to your door with armed men because you said no, or we're not going to comply to really like just despotic and tyrannical dictates that should have no force of law, but unfortunately here we are.
Well, and they only have the law only has teeth because we've allowed it to get to this point, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reasons on how that happened, and we could. That's a whole nother conversation on itself.
Yeah.
But are you familiar with the Gordon Call incident?
I can't really say that I am.
Okay, so prior to Ruby Ridge and prior to Waco and all of that stuff, this actually happened in northern Minnesota and North Dakota. And there's a guy here in town, and this is how I became aware of it, because it's kind of one of those incidences that, in the late 70s, early 80s, we didn't have the internet. You could people could get away with things that back then that you would be much less likely to get away with now.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But what happened is that there were farmers in North Dakota and farmers in Western Minnesota is a lot like North Dakota, the big farms and the rolling hills and land and, the black dirt. And they rejected taxes. They were like, we're not paying taxes. And when they rejected the taxes and they were told the IRS to go, kick rocks, it wasn't a big deal until it started to get national attention. Yeah. So Gordon Call, and I'm not an authority on this story, but Gordon Call saw some shady stuff that the U.S. government was doing, and they went after him. Essentially, that's what happened. And he was on the run for a while, and they caught up with him, I believe, down in Arkansas, like federal agents did. And you know what the result is when they catch up to you is that, his house burned down and he was inside of it and nobody knows what happened, except that there was, evidence of him and his son having been tortured prior to the house being burned down. And that information was, very quickly swept under the rug and, the house burned down and, they were inside of it. So, but that's Gordon Call is in his last name is Kahl. So, that spilled over into Bemidji in the early 80s. And I have a friend and the way I met him was through the farmer's market, selling sourdough bread at the farmer's market. And he realized that I was, dabbling in politics. And so pulled me aside and told me a story. But when they were looking for Gordon Call, because he was already on the run, they came by and talked to him. And he said, oh, no, we don't, covered for him. We don't know where he is. Yeah. And, even if they did know where he was, they weren't going to tell them. And so, the federal government doesn't take, people sticking up, fighting back or even in just being non-compliant. And they went after this, my friend personally, he spent 5 years in prison for, tax evasion or something like that. It was something that they didn't even tell him what he was in prison for, what he was going to prison for. Because he wasn't allowed, all of the processes, the judicial process that you're supposed to have access to. They denied him access. And so, and he spent 5 years in prison for that. But that's where it stemmed from, was being friends with Gordon Call and not complying with the federal government. So.
And I hate to say it, but surprise, surprise. I mean, it really unfortunately is not a surprise at all. And that's the sad thing, because it's become such a standard or consistent thing with the federal government as it pertains to how they act towards people that defy them or say no or we won't comply. Their first reaction, as with practically anybody they deal with, including foreign nations, is, well, we're going to bring guns to your door and you're going to do what we want you to. Like, it's just this this long track of just bullying people. And really, I mean, yeah, it might go on for a while, but it eventually can sustain itself. And there's a lot of historical examples as to why that typically doesn't sustain itself. So there's a comment here also by Paul, and I wonder if you could speak to this briefly also about hydroponics and aquaponics.
So hydroponics and aquaponics both are similar. Aquaponics being that you would grow vegetables out of basically a tank with fish in it, and usually it's some kind of tilapia or something like that. That's you can basically farm raised, and then the waste from the fish helps fertilize your plants, basically.
Sure.
And then hydroponics, very similar in that, you have plants growing out of basically water, and that you just keep that water flowing, and you are injecting the water with the fertilizer. And so, sure. And that's mainly the big difference with the two. We had a grocery store up here. It's a local, regional grocery store. I'm not even sure if there's any out of Bemidji, but called Lucan's. And they tried to do hydroponics in the back of the grocery store to be able to sell fresh lettuces, that kind of stuff throughout the winter. Great idea. The problem is, though, that to do it on a scale big enough to be able to really supply people with what they need is going to take a substantial amount of infrastructure, electricity. It's another one of those things that if you don't do your daily maintenance, and if something goes wrong, you've lost the whole thing. So then it takes time to recover from that. What I think, and eventually the grocery store, they don't do it anymore because it was kind of it was a good idea, but it was a failed project, So I think one of the things that they did wrong is that when you're doing hydroponics or aquaponics, a lot of that is like green leafy stuff. I think you could get maybe tomatoes and that kind of thing growing, but you really need to rely on, there's a lot of other things that go into place, because like anything with blossoms like tomatoes, cucumbers, rely on, the term's not coming to me, but fertilization of the buds so that they can grow fruits. And that does best out in a field, where you get the natural wind, the bees, the bugs, that kind of stuff, because that's their job. It takes 26 passes of a cucumber blossom for something to pollinate it. That's the word I'm looking for, a pollinator. For something to pollinate it, for it to become an actual cucumber.
Okay.
So you can think of, like, if you have somebody that's doing that artificially, how much time and how intensive that work would be just to produce a cucumber. So really that's what it came down to. They were growing greens. The greens didn't sell very well in the grocery store. We don't live in an area up here where a lot of people eat lettuce. I think that Minnesota or Bemidji is very much like a meat and potatoes kind of a place. I even see at the farmers market, the greens don't sell as well as I think they should. So, but that's what happened. It's a good idea on a small scale. Like if you were doing it for your own family and you had something small, it'd be fun. But on a large scale, to be able to keep people fed, it's too much work and too labor intensive.
And so it definitely is more cost effective at the personal level probably than it is at a much larger scale, I'm guessing.
I mean, if you were doing it as a hobby, it'd be and you were like, oh, I raised my own fish, but the cost of the fish is going to go up as a result of the how much money you're putting into something. And most people aren't going to be willing to pay for an increase in price, especially if we live in a low income area. So people have less money to spend. So
yeah. So just one more as it pertains to I think I kind of told you before, like, people are actually going to kind of actually be into this, and I think that's great.
Yeah, that's fine. I love talking about this kind of stuff. So
but Centerline Systems brings up pollination, and I know that there is a conversation around bees and the pollinators, and they've kind of taken a hit, it seems, in the last few years, pretty bad. And so if you want to provide some insight on that, I don't, again, I'm not so much in that realm, so I would definitely yield the floor to you especially, but where is that at? I mean, do we need to really start do more communities really need to start getting into an active effort to recover and replenish and kind of maintain these populations, or where is it at?
I think that when you talk about like people introducing new bugs, or a lot of times that has unintended consequences. So I'm more of a fan of just kind of, helping boost up what is already natural and what is already here. As an example, like the ladybugs we get in the fall that are just like all over the place. Yeah. Those are an invasive species that they brought in to control aphids, and now you can't get rid of them. They're not even from here. Like that. So that was a government program that just kind of was like, oh, and once you let them go, there's no ever taking them back. You know? So, perfect example of what not to do, and long-term unintended consequences. Yeah. So as far as the bees and mostly the pollinators, there's a couple of things here that I'm thinking about. I am not a fan of the herbicides, the spraying on the fields. I think that is another area that down the road we're going to realize how awful of a mistake that was. Yes, it has created pockets of weeds that are resistant to the sprays, and so it's a lot harder to get rid of them. It's created diseases and things that, because then they have kind of evolved to what they're exposed to, and then they become harder to get rid of. So I'm not a fan of doing, I do things organically where I'm at. And let's see, I'm trying to think of where I was going with that thought. Oh, pollinators. So the honeybees aren't actually natural to the United States, and a lot of people don't know that. So having honeybees around is kind of nice, because you get honey. Yeah. But they're not. They're from Italy and they're from Africa, but they're not a natural. They're not from the United States naturally. So the ones that are the big bumblebees. The big bumblebees do a great job at pollinating. They actually do better than honeybees do. Honeybees just kind of go off and do their own thing. And you might have like a box of honeybees next to your garden. They're not even in your garden. They're like down the road, doing whatever they do. But just allowing things to go back to where that nature intended. And I think that's where the good balance is. Planting flowers, you can definitely do that so that pollinators have, something to have access to. But really, in my opinion, the big thing is the spraying of fields and the chemicals that are just literally on everything. I think, and I don't have any research and background in any of that to be able to tell you for sure, but I think that's the main culprit of why we're seeing a lack of pollinators. And so if you're seeing that, planting flowers that are just, wildflowers, and instead of just having, a nicely mowed lawn, just wildflowers, that'll help to attract pollinators and give them a source of, food. So. Yeah, for sure. No, and I think that's, I think that's definitely one of the driving forces. And I think there's more studies. From what I've seen, there's more studies being conducted and data sets being collected now
regarding like, the herbicides and the insecticides and all of these different things that are being used, for farming and for so many of the realms of growing. And I think it's aside from all of the Monsanto drama that we've seen for years, it really is showing a lot of drastic effects, not just on humans, but also on, the creatures that kind of scurry around in and around the fields and the plants. And I think what people tend to forget too is a lot of it leaches away, right? So when you get a rain or you get all these things, it leaches into the rest of the ecosystem, and it really creates a lot of undesired effects. This
even
is
things that are organic right now, like by the government organic label, you're still allowed to have a certain amount of chemicals within your fields and within your, like what you're growing or you're producing, to be considered organic, because it doesn't go away. So as an example, if you sprayed your, actually corn is very heavily sprayed because it's typically is a GMO product. So like if you aren't getting organic corn, and organic can't be GMO. So if you're getting organic corn, then it's definitely not GMO. But where we are at this point is if you are buying corn and it doesn't say organic, it's probably GMO. But that's very heavily sprayed. It's also a main source of food to livestock because it helps put on fat, and very quickly on, cows, pigs, sheep, whatever. That's where you get the marbling effect in meat, is that, that's where the term like having something corn fed, right?
Yep.
So the corn has been sprayed, and then the cows eat the corn. And then even if you're using their manure as fertilizer, that those chemicals that they ingested through the corn passes through their body and into their manure. So even if you're like, oh, this is organic, the chemicals haven't broken down at all. And that's what they're realizing now, that
that's a great point.
Even when you're like doing things and you're trying to be natural and whatever, those like the I'm like I'm running on a little sleep right here, so these terms like aren't coming to my mind like they should be. But whatever the shelf life is, and that's the wrong term, but you know what I mean.
Yep.
Of the fertilizers, the herbicides, the pesticides, all of that kind of stuff has been passed down. That hasn't diminished whatsoever, and now it's in our water. So we've created this situation where you just, even if you are trying to be organic and staying away from things like that, you can't. It's impossible.
Right.
It's in the water supply. So
and I think that's a really good point, because it's something I hadn't even considered. And it really is just kind of this long train of consequential actions that I don't think a lot of people really take into account until it's really too late. And so I think that's, looking at kind of the grand scheme of things, I think that's why it's so important that we kind of start taking more and more of an active approach, and putting forth like legislation or bills that are going to be an actual positive force for farmers and for ranchers and for so many of the people in the agricultural sector, because really, I mean, aside from all of the financial ramifications, the kind of the ramifications of how they're able to go about growing or raising or whatever the case is, it all has this downstream effect. And I think it's, just in this conversation is being shown that it's so drastic, that it really is kind of this monstrosity within a monstrosity, if you will. And I want to point real quick to what Paul was saying, and then I'd like to kind of pivot into like the local and state a little bit more. But if you'd like to answer Paul's question, please go right ahead.
So for a small orchard, honeybees are definitely worth it. There's a lot more than just the pollinating that you get out of the honeybees. So mostly honey, which is nice, having that that raw honey, because the honey that you get at the store has been
Yeah.
completely altered. So it's not even real honey. But native bees would do the job even if you didn't have honeybees. And you would just want to make sure, just as a side note, that with your orchard, you want to have multiple varieties of trees that are all going to bloom at the same time. So for cross-pollination. So if like you only have one type of apple tree, you are going to need a second type of apple tree to be able to get apples that are going to be blooming because at the same time. And not all apple trees fruits at the same time of the season. So you have early, mid, late season apples. So you just got to know what variety you have and make sure you have a second one that's compatible with your first one.
Nice.
So.
Nice. That's all awesome information. And I'm not gonna lie, I kind of want to bring you back for just kind of an exclusive segment regarding to farming and agriculture, because as you've kind of seen in the comments, people really dig this stuff, and I would definitely take a whole bracket of time to just mull over this. So I mean, if that's something you definitely want to be into, I would.
I love it. I love talking about farming.
Yeah. So we'll have to make that a plan, because there's a lot that I think that we haven't spoken on yet, and and there's a few other topics I kind of want to beat down, but I think it definitely merits its own episode and its own conversation for sure. So, looking at kind of pivoting over to local and state politics, especially as it relates to federal. And I think we could even maybe answer two things at once here, and especially as it pertains to the state of our republic. From your perspective, what are some of the biggest challenges or obstacles that we face locally and in the state, but also, kind of where does that leave us then observing these different challenges to the state of our republic? I mean, are we even a republic? Are we a democracy? Are we devolved already into a despotism? But we'll start in one area first. In your perspective, what are the biggest challenges locally and at the state level?
The very first thing that comes to my mind, and this is everything that I'm involved with, it always comes down to this, is corruption. And here's the problem, is that there's not a law you can fix. There's not a person you can change out. There's absolutely nothing at this point that we can do to weed out the corruption with the state, because it's become foundational to the way the government operates. And I ran for U.S. Senate last election cycle, and really became very aware. Like it was a crash course. And I mean, I already believed the state was awful, right? Like, yeah. It was just like every day it was like, oh, and it gets worse. Oh, and it gets worse. Like, yeah. I don't know. I don't know how to fix that, because we don't have a type of government where you can just, like throw open the doors. And I'm kind of in my mind, I'm thinking like something out like Lord of the Rings, where he comes, throws open the doors, and like everybody's problems are solved. Yeah. We don't have that. And there's nobody that can come and save us. We have a strong lack of individuals who are willing to, throw themselves out there enough to be able to get involved and to overcome this. And even if you did, at this point, it's just so much a part of how things operate. I don't know where to go from here. Yeah. And so that's the biggest thing. I am not trying to sound black-pilled, because like maybe that's why I like farming so much, because that's something I can do, Yeah. But like the state itself is just so lost. And there's I don't know. As an example, because of my run for U.S. Senate, I became aware of a group that was working on voter fraud, basically. And they had the information. They had been collecting this data for years and years and years. And I think since 2010. So all of this data, they had been collecting it, which it's public information. Anybody can go get this information. It's just that when you're looking at it, most people aren't going to know how to interpret it or what to do with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Secretary of State, all of the voting data is public information.
Yeah.
And what they found is that, okay, so the way it's supposed to work is that when you register to vote in Minnesota, you establish a voting registry for yourself, a voting record, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And that every time you go to vote, no matter what precinct you're in or, you know, what day, they record the time, date, place. They don't record who you vote for, obviously.
Sure.
But like during the primaries, they record, did you take a Democrat primary, you know, ballot or a Republican, you know, so they have that information. And then, so every time you vote, it updates your record, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, in the 2016 elections in Minnesota, there were 230,000 extra votes cast that the Secretary of State's office never tied to a voting record, which is literally their job.
Holy crap.
That's literally their job.
Yeah.
It gets better in 2020, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that remember, you know, that election.
Yeah.
In Minnesota, there was 700,000 extra votes cast that were never tied to a voting record. This isn't just a metro problem either. This is every county across the board has between 5 and 15% at least, not at least.
Wow.
Fraudulent votes that are cast in any election, you know, like, so like if you're talking about like a close election where it literally comes down to the 2% on determines who gets that seat, but you're looking at least 10% of the votes cast being consistently fraudulent. Then how do you know, what how do you have any faith in the voting system after you have that information is, when you have that in front of you. So, I don't, the people that are in charge are the ones that are helping that along.
Yeah.
And the, the judicial system, they have them in their back pockets because they won't even hear. You can't sue to, try to get things fixed. The judicial system will have to be part of it. And then where do you go from there? That's all our checks and balances are there. Yeah. What do you do?
Yeah. No, it's it's astonishing how much there actually is. And I, just with those figures, I kind of knew that that these things were taking place and going on, but to the actual extent, especially even in Minnesota. And I think Minnesota is kind of a given, like given all of our problems, it's like, oh, well, that's not surprising that there's voter fraud. But when you look at it, at the amount, I mean, I didn't know that that's what that those were what the figures were. And to me, like, it shouldn't be surprising, but I mean, that's in 2020. I mean, that's pretty astonishing, really.
That's substantial. Like, how do you overcome 700,000 votes? Like, how do you?
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost as if like there was some obscure drive-through that they just had a bunch of people go through and they're just like, hey, just throw something in there and don't worry about the ramifications. And I mean, there was a lot of conversations about, how best to like fix the voting system, if it can be fixed, if there's even a way to fix it at this point. And I think, the voting challenges aside, you and I had also talked about ballot access issues too. And even not that it would necessarily fix the fraud issue, but just the ability of people being able to kind of vote or align themselves with somebody that isn't a Republican and a Democrat too. And I know that was a conversation that we had briefly had the other day, but that's also something I'd kind of like to talk about too. You know, at the local and state level, because ballot access is a very big issue, in my opinion, and obviously in your opinion as well. So,
yeah, ballot access laws are, I mean, they're put into place to keep people so that they can maintain their monopoly of power. That's essentially what's happened. If we don't have equal access to the ballot, as an example, for us to be able to get onto a statewide, and here's the thing. Actually, I'm going to take a couple of steps back. This is what people have to understand. For a third party like the Libertarian Party or the Independent Alliance Party or the marijuana parties, or, you know, whatever it is, Minnesota used to have this rich third party culture, right?
Yeah.
For us to be able to maintain our party status, and political parties are broken down basically into tiers. You have your major parties, you have your minor parties. And that's not just a term like that we have given ourselves, but it's a legal term that's essentially used against us when it comes to ballot access. For us to be able to be a major party, we would have to get 8% or more in a statewide race. There's only certain races that are eligible to be able to meet that threshold. So let's say that we get 8% of the vote, and I have a guy in our team that has gotten very close down in St. Paul, you know, overcoming that. But it's it's a House representative race. It's ineligible to determine party status. So the only races that are eligible to determine party status are your statewide races. That's governor, secretary of state, auditor, attorney general, U.S. Senate, and president. Those are the only ones. The ones that we are less likely to do well in. Like when you're talking about statewide races, you know, these are the races that people put, there's a lot of hysterics, and people are less likely to consider a third party in these big races because they're so afraid of the other side winning. So they're voting for whoever their guy is, you know, out of fear.
Sure.
And they're less likely to change parties to vote on statewide races. So the race that we're less likely to do well in are literally by law the only ones we're allowed to determine our party status in.
Yeah.
Additionally, when it comes to ballot, to get onto the ballot, to be able to do a statewide race, the ones that we have to run, we have a 2-week time period at the end of May, beginning of June, to collect 2,000 certified signatures per candidate to get them on the ballot.
Wow.
What I mean certified is you have to have people's name, address, year of their birth, the county that they live in. And the Secretary of State's office literally takes 2 weeks to go through these, you know, your petitions line by line, and making sure that these people, their information's correct. If it's in, if you can't read their handwriting, those are ineligible. They're thrown out. Or if there's something wrong, those are thrown out. So even though you need 2,000, you really need to turn in 2,500 to 2,700, but you only have 2 weeks to do that per race.
Wow. That's wild.
So you can see how, like, very quickly you add up, like, we have to do this petitioning, but if you only have 14 days to do it, 2,000 signatures per statewide race is just to do one is a substantial burden, but to do more than one is almost a hurdle that's impossible to overcome.
For sure.
So when you see minor parties on the ballot and you only see like the Libertarians on like this race, but not in any other races, that's why we don't have the manpower to be able to overcome the petitioning. House representative races, those are 500 certified signatures each. And then the congressional district races, those are 1,000 signatures each, I think, off the top of my head.
Okay.
Sounds right. So if you're, let's say as a party, we have 6 people that want to run for their House representative races. 6 times 500, you're already looking at 3,000 signatures.
Sure.
To keep our party status, we have to also run the statewide race. And so 2,000 extra signatures for that. And that party status certification is only good for 4 years. So every 4 years, we have to do this again. And so that's where we're at. So when I ran for Senate, for us, that was a necessary race that we had to run, because if we had not run that race, we would have lost our party status in Minnesota.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, when we did for Libertarian, we did well. But there's, and this kind of goes back to the fraud too, is that there's the system, the voting fraud relies on third party to kind of, shift votes. Oh, they got these votes, and like shift them into sometimes creating a vacuum. But we saw that happen during my race. At one point, the votes that were cast hit like 57 or 58,000 votes.
Okay.
And then within a few minutes, because we were watching the screen, like as it was.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Like, it's you spend a lot of time on what those numbers mean, and so we were watching the screen, and we watched it go all the way up, and then we watched it go back down. And it landed on 55,000. But
wow.
So I mean, saw that happen in real time. But
yeah, and that's wild to me. I think it should be alarming to anybody who either participates or whether as just a voter or somebody that is like wanting to run, right? Or even somebody, like, even if you're not in either of those camps, say you abstain from the whole thing, it should still be alarming to people at how the voting is seemingly manipulated with the amount of fraud that's in there, and you see so many of these different factors that affect voting. But in saying that, when you look at things like ballot access and you look at the amount of control and really it's a monopolization of the vote, right? Like, it's controlling the vote in so many ways that I think a lot of people, I think they try to explain it away, but then it's like we come back to the situation to where it's like, well, like, it'll be different this time. It's like, no, really, the only way it could be different is if you divest yourself from the system that's perpetually screwing over your vote and your ability to make a reasonable decision versus this situation to where you're really kind of collected or pushed into this, well, lack of a better way of putting it, like almost a monopolized single vote type of situation. Now, I know some people might say, like, well, it's not really a single vote. You're voting for a Republican or a Democrat, but I think it's been pretty well established that at this point, regardless of which side you vote for, you're kind of getting the same outcome with a few, quirks that are specific to them.
Especially in Minnesota.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, when we look at this, especially whether it's running or voting or whatever the case is, in your minds, is there a case? Should we have more parties, or is that something that people get wrong? Because at least before I yield myself, when I look back at so many of the founders and their views on parties, a lot of them are very opposed to even having a party to begin with. And back in that time, if there was a party, it seemed like they were only temporary just to help support somebody. And then once the person got in, the party didn't matter anymore. It was gone. And, you never really heard much more of it after until the next election cycle. So, is there a sense of stability that actually comes with more parties, or is it a situation to where it's, I don't know, like, is it just inherently worse at this point? What's your take on that?
So I, especially through having gone through an election, I am now of the belief that is the political party system that's the problem. Like if there was an act of God and I ever became like supreme ruler of how all of this works, the first thing that I would do is blow up the political party system. Like, take the parties off the ballots so that people actually have to look into who these people are that they're voting for. They can't just vote off whether they're a Democrat or a Republican or whatever, like they have to actually do their research. Because this monopoly of, a corrupted system, they're relying on people's ignorance. And people honestly are more than willing to just remain blissfully ignorant. Like that's where people at. They don't want to talk politics. They don't want to have their lives messed with. They don't want to inconvenience themselves in any way. They don't want the confrontation that often comes with conflicting ideas. So we have allowed our basically the culture of the United States to just become this unthinking kind of blob that votes every 4 years, and they know it and they absolutely take advantage of it, So it's the political party system. I am of the belief that being able to vote and being able to vote freely is a First Amendment right. In the same way, being able to have access to the ballot is a First Amendment right. I mean, like the First Amendment literally says that you should be able to like petition your government for your grievances.
Yes.
And if we don't have the way that we do that is through voting. But if you don't have political parties that have access to the ballot, because the ones that are in charge and give you the illusion of choice have made it so that nobody else can compete, then do you really have, do you have free access to be able to petition your government? I mean, if any one of us was like, hey, I've got this going wrong, or I see this and I want this addressed, do you have access to your representatives? No, none of us do, like that's just not even a thing. So that would be, getting rid of the political party system. It's just such a toxic culture. It puts people into boxes that they even know why they're there. Like if we're being honest, like there's some people that don't even know why they vote Democrat or vote Republican. It's just because that's what they've been conditioned to do, but they don't know anything about their people. But as a side note, the two major parties, they're not even different. Like they put on this show on TV that's like, oh, well, this and this, or, we don't like this, and this. But in Minnesota, and this came out probably last January or February, but the former chair of the GOP, David Hann, who ironically helped restrict our ballot access. He wrote a letter in support and keeping libertarians on all other minor parties off of the ballot. He got caught working with Representative Tom Emmer. They created a shell company in Wyoming and were funneling GOP. Sorry, I just got a little excited and bumped my computer. But they were funneling GOP donations to this shell company in Wyoming that was then turning around and funding Democrats in Minnesota. I don't know, like, why, if you know that this is what has been happening, and like people are like, you can't even pretend, like the information's out there, so then you got to decide what to do with it. And instead of people being like, oh, well, I reject this, or, we should do something about this, they're like, it's fine. It'll work. Like, people aren't mad enough. That's really what it comes down to. But
that's
so
fair.
The major parties in Minnesota aren't different. And as a side note, who ran Trump's campaign in Minnesota? It was Tom Emmer. They're all connected. So, where do you go from there? Besides. And this is the route that I've taken, is just refusing to participate in the facade. I'm just not going to be a part of it, Yeah,
I think when we really look at it, you brought up a lot of really great points. And I think if we're going to move forward, especially if we're going to try and move forward in an actual meaningful, honest way when it comes to, parties, or not even so much parties, but people that are put on the ballots, that you vote for. I definitely 100% I think that's the ideal thing, is to strip the parties away and let these individuals stand on their own merits and actually have to earn your vote based off of, the merit of their principles, the merit of their arguments, and, the merit of the work that they've done. Because it's like, if that was one of those things that actually was in function right now,
Mm-hmm.
virtually everybody that's in office wouldn't even be there, because they're defunct in their merits, they're defunct in their principles. And it's really telling when you start to break this down and you look at these things and you look at the system and the way that it is, and you just realize like how just corrupt and insidious and just vile it really is. I mean, it's just the example that you gave of, everything that went on with those who is it, Hand and Ham or Hand and
David Ham,
Emmer,
the former
it's
GOP
like,
chair. Yeah,
it's like, my gosh, like if there was ever a telling sign of just like, no, like as George Carlin says, it's all one big club, and guess who's not in it? It's you. You're not in it.
right.
It's
I think
like,
about that all the time. That
yeah,
Skit. He was
yeah,
he was a man of he had considerable insight to what was
yeah,
going on, and a way that he could get that information out, and
yeah,
somehow like they were, I don't know, like he just, anyways, but I just think about it all the time, like you're just, it's a club and you're not involved, like they don't want you there,
yeah,
because I'm not the kind of person that'll just go along with what everybody else wants to do.
yeah,
And it's not in my nature to just go along with the crowd, but that's
yeah,
what they're looking for. They need people that'll just help keep propping themselves up,
for
and
sure.
will be yes men, and will just do what they're told
Yeah.
and fill the seats.
Yeah, and I think to kind of bow tie this, because there's one final segment I'd like to hit on, and part of that, I think, actually think the next segment is pretty near and dear to your heart, given your background, and I'll allow you to kind of explain that a little bit too. But just to bow tie this, I mean, really, it's, yeah, I mean, you got to step back and you just got to be like, man, like, if it's not working, at what point do we divest and start to just take more of an actual concerted stand, put more effort into areas in ways and means that are going to actually make a meaningful impact. And that's not just divesting from the local things of like farms and financial, but we need to step back and really evaluate how this whole system is, because quite frankly, it's overwhelmingly broken. And I think the next segment is even going to put a magnifying glass on really how broken that system is, because it's one of the biggest components of that. So I'll let you kind of give a few final words on this, and then we'll shift into the final portion here.
Yeah, about the final words on the ballot access stuff. I think that if there was a message that I wanted to tell people, and this is essentially what I did when I ran for Senate, was that I want people that vote their conscience, and that's it's okay to vote your conscience. It's okay to vote for a person and not the party.
Yeah.
You don't, and a lot of people I think are looking for permission, but also they're starting to see things for the way that they are, but they need a little bit of help to be able to get to the correct conclusions, because when you're wading through all this information all by yourself and you're doing it for the first time, it is really hard to put your thumb onto where it originates. And if you can't see a problem in its entirety on what it actually is, and you can't see it in the bigger picture, you really, like, the solutions are just kind of like fog. You can't really grab a hold of them and hold on to them, because you're not even entirely sure what the problem is. You just know something's wrong, So I ran on, vote for me as a person. Even if like our policies don't align completely, I don't think that matters, because that what it comes down to, and I think this is what a lot of people are just, craving, and really, that's probably the right word, is just craving. Yeah. People want somebody to believe in. They want somebody that will listen to them, validate their concerns, see them as a person, and kind of have that, that relationship maybe is the wrong word,
Sure.
but like that, that back and forth where they realize that they are to you a meaningful person.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I did so well on Senates, because that was the message that I took,
Yeah. And it was a great message, to be honest. I mean, when I looked at what your platform was, it was done well. So
thank you. Yeah, I mean, that's just what a lot of people, they're the big, you will always get those people. There was three things there were certain people, they were like, what do you think on A, B, and C? And that was immigration, abortion, and Trump. And there were some people like that's all that mattered to them, like, where do you stand on those three things? But there are a lot more people that are realizing that it's got to be more than just about these key things that don't have a solution. Abortion, immigration, and Trump don't have a solution. They definitely don't have a political solution. So, recognizing that those just keep getting brought up every 4 years to keep people divided is, how you learned how to be able to get past that. And that, if you can trust a person and, and know who they are and believe in their character, then regardless, even if they make a decision that you don't fully agree with, that trust in that person is going to fill in those gaps. Right. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's well said. And and I do agree. I think that people really, they do look for somebody who recognizes, as you said, like their immediate needs, the things that are going to affect them the most. It's like when most people do go to the gas station, like even if you look at like the federal election hype, a lot of people are just like, abortion, immigration, all of these different things. But it's like at the heart of it, when they're done with it, when they're done with the federal election, what do they actually care about? They care about like how much their gas is going to cost, if their taxes are going to go up, if they're going to be able to feed their family based off of what they make at their job, if they're going to have to start to, like, I hate to say it, but like to some degree, and depending on what it is, like to ration things and to cut back and to take painful steps just to kind of preserve themselves as an individual and their families. And I think immediately those are the things that people really look to people to try and help with. And so I think what you said really kind of hits home for a lot of people. And so that was well said. I appreciate that. And I'm sure a lot of the people here appreciated that as well. So, looking at kind of this final segment, we briefly talked about this a little bit. Defend the Guard. And I know that's another really big, meaningful subject and conversation, not just in Minnesota, but in many, many states across the United States right now. Defend the Guard is obviously a very, very important issue because it surrounds the conversation regarding states and their National Guard units and being able to help prevent us from being dragged into unconstitutional, illegal wars without having without the idea of having Congress to formally declare something, which they've avoided trying to do for decades now.
40, was it 41, 40? When did Pearl Harbor happen? Yeah, that was the last time.
Yeah,
the declaration happened the way it was supposed to.
Yeah, and I think Defend the Guard ties nicely into also this warfare state and this monstrosity that we have now. And I mean, you look around and you see these neocons and these guys like Lindsey Graham and Fine and so many others. And I hate to say it, but like even all the way up to the top of the presidency in his general administration. I mean, you had some of these people that were talking about no more wars, but what have we gotten? I mean, Somalia. And you look at just the general bombing campaign that the administration has undertaken. The last number that I had was it was like 550 bombs dropped just since the start of I think the year of the administration, and it's like that's insane. And, we're still bombing Somalia. We're still involved in many other places in the Middle East where we're not doing it. We're still funding everything that's happening in Gaza, which is overwhelmingly reprehensible. And now we're getting into, we went from this idea of maybe being able to try and deal with Russia on I don't even know if we even, looking back at it, if we even tried diplomacy. And now we're just back to this idea of like, well, if you're not going to do what we say, then like, I guess we're just going to have to start to slowly escalate things up to and including a very ironic statement. I tried to find the original video, but I was not able to before this started. But Trump was asked by an interviewer pertaining to a question pertaining to Russia, but one of his responses was, like the Russians, they're spending so much money and so much treasure and towards war and they could, as Trump would say, they could be very rich, they could have it all, they could be very rich. And it's like, Mr. President, that's like the pot calling the kettle black. Last time I checked, yeah, it's like last time I checked, we outspend basically the entire world in what we put into bombing other people. And then, I'll yield the floor on this, and you can please take it wherever you'd like to go. And then you have Chris Donahue, General Donahue, who came out recently saying, no, we're good to go. Like, we have a plan to basically go into Kaliningrad, and it's all set up. We have a plan. We've been planning this for a long time. It's like, my goodness, like, does it seem to you like we're just teetering on this proverbial edge of the abyss at this point? I mean, where does it end?
Yeah, it does. So a little bit about my background in this matter specifically. This is actually what kind of propelled me into politics. There were a lot of other things that kind of happened, but when it came to like the Libertarian Party and the platform, the Libertarian Party is very clear on having an anti-war platform, right? It's not a platform of pacifism, and that needs to be very clear. Like, you can be against the wars, but also not a pacifist. Like if somebody, because you have the right of self-defense. So if you're attacked, defend yourself. Don't just take it. But we aren't being attacked. And you can say, oh, well, they're attacking this country and this country, and we have assets there. That's not our country. Yeah. Those aren't our people. That's not our, like, it just, and I mean, and at this point, the United States has so many like bases and, working part, like in countries all over the world, that it doesn't matter what other countries do. You're going to hit some kind of an asset from the United States, yes. Because we've become, we're into everybody's business. So in 2000, straight out of high school, I joined the Army and, prior to 9/11 and all that kind of stuff happening. I grew up in a southern Mississippi, southern Louisiana, like right on the coast. It was another low income area. I didn't have anybody like helping me get to college, but I was athletic, and I've always been a very busy person, and I wanted a challenge. Also, I wanted to get out of town, so like joining the Army made sense. Yeah. And so I did, and I went to school to be a combat medic and graduated combat medic school in July of 2001. And then, we know what happened in September. The Twin Towers fell. And by 2003, we're at war also with Iraq. So we're fighting war on two fronts. Mm-hmm. I ended up in 2004 in the 2nd Infantry Division, which was actually back then in Korea, in South Korea. And I ended up in the 2nd Infantry Division, and they were looking at pulling units that they wouldn't normally deploy to Iraq, because they'd worked themselves in this situation where they had overextended resources, Sure. So they took our brigade out of Korea, which is technically already a hardship tour because you're not allowed to have your family there.
Yep.
And sent us to the Al Anbar province in Iraq in 2004. And I'm never sure, like, people geography and what people know or don't know, but
Sure.
the Al Anbar province is where Fallujah was, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
And we were based out of Ar Ramadi. We ran the aid station there as medics. I was part of an evac team. And so if a engineering battalion or company or the artillery or sometimes even the infantry units needed extra support, they would pull from our evac team. And so we would run, even as a not a man, we would run these teams out with these, combat arms companies and help set up the casualty collection points. We would do, just support in that kind of a way, but definitely not inside the, the somewhat of a secure, our forward operating bases.
Yep.
Through those experiences, Ar Ramadi, that deployment started out very hard and very fast. We started losing people within days of getting there, and that didn't let up at all for the entire 12 months we were there. And by the time that we left, we were under combat strength. We had taken more casualties than any brigade had taken or would take for the entirety of the 20 years on both theaters of war, Iraq and Afghanistan. And our aid station was just a constant nonstop of people coming in, blown up, shot, burned. Okay, yeah. So, you just had it, nobody came back the same, And then because that wasn't fun enough, I re-enlisted and went to Baghdad in 2006 with 2ID also. And we were there when the surge started, and the way that they, boosted the numbers to get enough people, it was supposed to be 30,000 extra troops. It wasn't extra troops. They just kept those of us that were already there longer. So a 12-month deployment turned into a 15-month deployment. The combat had changed considerably from when I was in Ramadi to when I was in Baghdad. It was very, very different. And, you come out of those experiences with you're not the same, so up until, so I actually jumped in feet first into politics or into the Libertarian Party in 2021. Often people were like, well, what were you doing in that amount of time? I was healing. Like that's what was happening, and really like getting involved with politics and doing stuff like the Defend the Guard legislation and being able to talk and tell people like, this is why it's important. This is my story. This is what happened. And one of the things that I have chosen to, as a strategy to take, is not to pull the punches on the graphic details of what happened and who it impacted.
Good for you on that, by the way. It's so important that you don't.
Yeah. It's been healing for me. It like all of that anger and that negative energy was there. And this is a way of channeling it into a healthy direction, because there were times that, like even for myself and my husband, he was in Iraq too with us. Like we were on both deployments together. There were times like especially 2014 when Ramadi fell to ISIS. I really struggled with that because, then that got us to a point where like, well, why did we lose all our people? Like, why did we do that? If it was just going to come into, we were just going to walk away. And I mean, really at some point that was always going to be the result, is that they had to do this on their own. We had to, this was unsustainable, but it forced me to confront, I think what, we already knew was that we never should have been there in the first place. We weren't fighting the insurgency. We were the insurgency, like this isn't, and when you are, especially as a veteran, like take that and figure out how to wrap your mind around that. Not everybody can get through that. You know what I mean? Yeah. And we have lost more people in our group to suicide and to just a general, you know, their lifestyle choices that just drove them to an early grave than we ever lost in Iraq. And we lost a lot in Iraq. So this is, you know, when I kind of just talked about this yesterday on social media, like everybody has a price in politics. Some of us have already paid that price. Yeah. And, you know, when you are doing something to honor the memory and the sacrifice of somebody else, that you can't be compromised.
Right.
There's absolutely nothing that anybody can do to give you to kind of, you know, shift your focus on what the goal is. Yeah. And that's where I'm at. Like I would do a dishonor to every single person, and I know all of their names, to their memory if I didn't see this through. And part of that is the Defend the Guard legislation. Today, that's what that looks like. Yeah. You know, but there's going to be other moving pieces for the military industrial complex to be able to get them under control or to make them obsolete. And really that's the goal, is not to just get it under control, but is to make it obsolete. Yeah. Because they have completely integrated themselves into who our government is, and so that they are working in unison. And everybody around the world is at risk when that is the case. Yes.
Yeah, it's I think that is the big goal, is to put these people out of business, right? I mean, you look at in many cases, the irreparable damage that's been caused. And I mean, your story is so important, especially as it pertains to Defend the Guard and those experiences. And, you know, it seems like some of the biggest advocates that have filled up the anti-war movement or Defend the Guard are veterans, right? Because they've seen it, they've been there, they've seen it. They're just like, yeah, no, this was, well, in hindsight, I mean, you look at all of the lies and all of the things that were put into it. I mean, you were just talking about, you know, how many people were lost, and it's like it seems like even to today, even though that it's known only because that you have independent people that talk about the numbers, they still, like, it seems, just try to avoid that conversation. Like, oh, it wasn't that bad. It's like, no, it was that bad. And it was that bad for the course of 20 years, right? Like, this wasn't a light or transient thing. Like, you lied us not only into these wars, but so many wars before it. And it was because you had these ties that you could make money off of, and you could, you know, you had all of these outside interests. And I mean, it's the irreversible damage that was caused, and the reprehensible actions of these people that perpetually try and push us into these conflicts. Yeah, it's no surprise, Rebecca, that you have veterans that are like, yeah, no, you know what's a really good idea? To not do this anymore, right, and to not perpetuate this cycle of insanity. And yeah, like I said, this story is so important because it really is one of the strongest arguments for Defend the Guard, as well as so many other people's stories that are that have shared experiences. Yeah, I thank you very much for sharing that, because it does matter. It really does matter. You know, if you want to, explain a little bit more on that, you're welcome to. Otherwise, before we get into what Defend the Guard actually is and how it would really augment the states to be able to help hopefully prevent sending more people into situations like that.
Well, and so a lot of people don't realize, and this is mostly like there's just such a disconnect of Americans from a lot of things. I mean, it's not just the food system, but it's also, very few people actually serve in the military. Even people that do join and serve in the military, very few of us actually see combat, Yeah. So like, it's such a small percentage of people And in my situation, like even smaller than that, doing it as a female, like, so like there's such a small group of us that have the ability to talk about this with authority, because we saw it happen. I'm not telling you this story secondhand. I'm telling you because I can like literally relive it while we're discussing this.
Yeah.
So that I feel like that's a responsibility that I have. And part of me, also thinks that there are certain people that were just, we have to go through these things. We have to go through these hard things that would break other people so that we can be the advocates that other people need in the future. Like there's a certain amount of responsibility that comes with, owning your experiences so that you can stand in the gap for people, for other people that don't have that ability to do that for themselves. And for me, I mean, we've got kids now. I've got adult children now, so like,
right.
I'm very much concerned, and being part of the military is in our blood. Like my mom, my dad, my husband's mom and dad, like aunts, uncles, grandparents, for my family and my husband's family. This is just what everybody did, but I can't get past what happened. And it's not like this just started with Iraq and Afghanistan, right? Like we're talking about like the first Gulf War, Vietnam is probably one of the more obvious examples beyond Iraq and Afghanistan, but the Korean War, like all these skirmishes that happen on a regular and consistent basis. And the most recently, we just bombed Iran, a completely sovereign country that had, I know that people will try to make that argument that they posed a threat, but everybody poses a threat. It's not until that they actually act on that threat do we have any authority whatsoever to defend ourselves. And because if we pull the trigger before that actually happens, we're creating the exact scenario that we claim that we're trying to avoid. And then B, we've become the aggressor. And there is not a single situation in foreign policy right now where the United States can claim the moral high ground. None whatsoever. And we could talk about Israel and Gaza. And I've had, I have a lot of friends that are like, well, Israel. I'm like, yeah, but look what they're doing to Gaza. Like, they're like, oh, well, Hamas was an awful government. I'm like, do you guys recognize our government? Like, how is our government and the Hamas government any different? Would you be so willing to just accept the carpet bombing in your neighborhood because a neighboring country doesn't like your government?
Well, we call it democracy, Rebecca. That's how we get away with it.
Maybe. So, we need to quit normalizing this level of aggression and military activity and look for, more peaceful options. I think that if it were me and I was supreme ruler of the United States, and I didn't have to, worry about what other people are thinking, much less try to get elected, I guess, as a libertarian, which is, that would take an act of God, but like if it were me, I would be pursuing peace through, trade agreements. Like, let's be friends. Why do we have to be enemies? Because somebody before us was enemies? I don't buy that.
Right.
There are things that we have that other countries need. There are things that other countries have that we could use. Let's just be friends,
Yes.
And but we can do that and still maintain our sovereign nation boundaries. And we can do both.
No, I agree with you. And that's definitely a disposition that I've taken over the years, and some people that are currently in the chat, one who's blowing up the chat right now. I'm looking at UCLS. We've talked about this a lot. As it pertains to whatever happened to sitting down and having a whiskey and talking about like, hey, like we might not agree on some things, but like that's fine. We don't have to in order to have a trade agreement, or at least have, in the very least, neutral diplomacy to the point to where it's just like, okay, like we don't agree with this, but at the same time, like it's not for us to say what your conduct is. We might say this is a terrible thing, but at the same time, like we can still have dialogue, we can still have communication, we can still be diplomatic about these things, and hopefully come to some sort of like an agreement or whatever the case is, or some conclusion to all of this. But when you basically, and this might put people in a some kind of way, but when you go at foreign diplomacy without the diplomatic part, and you try to approach it like a no-knock raid at 3 a.m. in the morning with a freaking battering ram, what do you think is going to happen? It's not going to be received well, and I, it's a very large issue. We obviously have the MIC, the military industrial complex. We have so many vocal voices. We have people that even from outside our country that really push us to be involved in places like the Middle East and so on and so forth. But I think the beauty of what Defend the Guard does is it really helps, bring some of that control back to the states to say no more. And, the more and more I've read on Defend the Guard, the more and more I've looked at it, the more and more I've taken a real interest in it is, kind of going back to what you're saying, like what better of a way to say that, to show that you care about the military and the veterans and all of the people in that sphere than to say, you know what, the best thing that I can do for you and to help you is to not send you into another war. It's one of those things to where like you mentioned, like what is the most effective way to honor that memory? By not getting them involved into illegal, unconstitutional wars. So
right, and we need to make sure that we are not taking advantage as a country, taking advantage of the sacrificial nature of the military. Yeah, these are guys that are more than willing to run into gunfire, and for the person to the right and the left of them. Yeah, and there, we have people at the top that take advantage of that. Yes. Of that, that nature, which is a good and honorable nature. But there are people that, they keep creating the scenarios that cause these things to happen. Yes. And, like seeing my friends that died and their families and their mothers still grieving their losses 20 years later, that's heavy. They deserved a different outcome. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And, and there's a couple comments I want to put up here as it pertains to this, about the aspect of complete control to prevent us from doing what we should and what we want to do, which I definitely think is a huge factor in that. And there's another comment by Sean Kennedy, who's the chair of the American Liberty Caucus. Hi, Sean. Great to have you in the comments, brother. But he's another huge proponent of Defend the Guard, as is practically everybody in the caucus. To where it is true, like what he's saying, it really does depend on being involved. Like if you want to see something change, you have to get involved. You cannot sit on the sidelines and wait for these things to miraculously just manifest themselves. You have to contact the representatives. You have to put that pressure on. And I know we talked a little bit about that. If you'd like to kind of briefly explain to those who aren't familiar with what Defend the Guard is, or what the crux of it is, if you could flesh that out, but then also as it pertains to some of the Minnesota people in here, who are the wonderful people that we should be putting pressure on, Rebecca? Because I know you were fired up about that when we talked about that. So. So Defend the Guard legislation, it's a very simple, it's a one-page bill.
Yeah.
And all it says is that for the Minnesota National Guard to be able to be used in, places where there's going to be combat, is that first we need to go through the proper steps of having Congress declare war, like the U.S. Constitution, gives them authority to do. That's it. That's all it says. It shouldn't be controversial, especially for constitutional conservatives, which is plentiful up north. If you're a constitutional conservative, then I used to think that meant that they believed the U.S. Constitution was the authority of the land.
You would think.
And I'm realizing now that is just things that people say to get themselves elected, and are once again relying on the ignorance of the masses to not ask the right questions.
Yeah.
Because when we have the bill, and here's where it's at in Minnesota. This is actually significant. In Minnesota, we have an author, multiple authors in both the Senate and in the House this year, in this last legislative session. So even with as much of a disaster the legislation session was, there were some things that were being worked on that are really good. This is one of those things. We have not just authors and co-authors, but bipartisan authors and co-authors in both the Senate and the House. And for it to be able to pass and become law, it's got to pass in both the Senate and in the House. So we have the bill ready to go in both areas. And actually, just as a side note, those the political shootings that killed House Speaker.
Oh, this is a big one, yeah.
Shoot, I can't remember her name, but the one that the husband and wife that didn't die.
Yep.
Senator Hoffman and his wife. He was one of our Defend the Guard authors, and that was shot. So I don't know if there's going to be anything from that, but that's just a side note. He was maybe as good as a Democrat can get. I don't know. You're gonna he signed, at least he co-authored the bill, and I appreciate that. Yeah. So the holdup in Minnesota isn't having the bill in either place. It's that there are Republicans who literally, Representative Matt Bliss is the Veterans Committee chair, and he will not allow this bill to go and get a hearing in the committee. He just will not. And the way that our, it works to be able to pass a bill in our government is that it's got to go through the committee, and it's got to get passed in both the House and Senate. And so by him choosing single-handedly to make sure that this bill doesn't get a hearing in the committee, it stops all progress in the state from being passed. And he's a Republican. He claims he's a constitutional conservative. He'll make that claim really big and loud in front of his people. Yeah. And I've gone to a meet and greet because he's actually my representative. Yeah. So he was in town, and I knew that he was going to show up to the Beltrami Republican BPOU. And so I went there too. He saw me walk through the door. He was nodding his head. He knew what I was there for, because I've been sending him people for weeks leading up to that about Defend the Guard. And he claimed that it was unconstitutional. The law was the Defend the Guard legislation was unconstitutional at its base, and therefore that's why he is holding it up from getting it a hearing. What actually happened is that when I brought this bill to him the first time, and I brought this bill to him as a veteran, and he knows that about me, he was like, well, I need to, hear from my National Guard guys. And when a politician says that, they're not going to ask the privates or the specialists or the buck sergeants. They're not going to ask them. And even if they are, most of those guys are so young, they don't, they're like, war, yeah, you know what I mean? They're good senses. I don't know if if you've ever been around a whole bunch of Army guys, but they're not the people you should go to ask for good advice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But what he did was he went and talked to the generals in the National Guard. And in Minnesota, there's only there's 3, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And they told him literally not to pass the bill. They don't want the bill passed. They don't want it in Minnesota. They speak for the entire National Guard, and it's a bad idea. Don't do it. And so and I have that on recording. Back before he realized like how big an issue this was going to be.
Yeah.
Or how unwilling I was going to be to like let this go and let him slide. Like he doesn't get a free pass, you know? I was sending the guys on my team to him being like, hey, you need to call him, you know, talk to him about this. And he was very open about, you know, the way that things had gone down and why he wasn't going to support it. So initially he didn't make the claim that it wasn't constitutional. That was information he was fed to say later on down the line.
Sure. Yep.
But initially, and we have it on recording because one of my guys recorded the conversation with him, that he admitted that he was told by the Minnesota National Guard generals not to pass the bill or not to give it any time. And we have that, you know, so like when we're talking about the military industrial complex, if you know that a bill like this is getting traction across the nation in your states, and we have, to some degree, this bill exists in over 30 states in the country. All you have to do is get that one strategic guy to compromise on his values. And in Minnesota, that's Representative Matt Bliss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's boy, that really paints a picture, doesn't it? And it's not a very nice picture. It's a picture of like, hey, you know what? To any parent that has a child in the Minnesota National Guard, you know that leadership. Well, they're willing to just throw your children right under the bus because they have other interests other than actually being good leadership. They have interests that are going to probably, you know, they might never say this, but might give them a cushy job after they're done somewhere in like Raytheon or wherever they are, you know, and that might be stretching a little bit. But I mean, I'm a pattern guy, Rebecca, and if we look at patterns, where do most of these guys end up who promote the MIC and all of their desires and all of these different things? They always sit on these big boards and they get a cushy retirement, and they have like 3 houses between Florida and wherever else. And it's just like, yeah, no, like and this is, it's such a damning statement to, I think, kind of when we look at the leadership apparatus that is in place. I mean, one would think people would be up in arms about this, you know, like, oh my gosh, like they're willing just to kind of throw people to the wolves. And then they say that they care so much about their soldiers, and they care so much about, you know, and I would even potentially go just beyond the National Guard. But I mean, if this is the mentality in the National Guard, what is the mentality, you know, that's in the regular Army or the Marines or the Navy or the Air Force or wherever? Like, if that's how it is at just the more state level, I mean, it leaves a lot to the imagination, does it not?
Yeah, and you know, the military relies on young, basically kids, you know, who don't have any experience in the world. Yeah. They're not old enough to be able to have the advantage of hindsight or wisdom. Like, none of that is grown. You don't get that without having gone through all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And being able to, you know, come to the conclusions that you are. So they're young and they're ignorant. They're completely gung-ho, which is great when you actually have a problem you need to face. You need guys that are willing to run into gunfire when they're actually defending something. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But it just, that's not what our situation is today. We're not, there's nothing to defend. There's just, anyways, I could keep going in circles about this, but you know. No, I hear you. Well, we'll kind of put a bow tie on this. You know, there's a lot of, it seems like there's a lot of problems, and what we really need, I think, in
in looking at these problems is we really, as the average individuals, we need to come together, we need to mobilize, and we have to start taking part in our government. We have to start taking part in the things that occur, and we have to be able to, in coming together, have the strength to say, no, we're not going to stand for this. No, you're not going to come in here and tell us what we're going to do, how we're going to live. And more importantly, that we have to go to war for some, scheme or whatever the case is that the military industrial complex and company, or bankers for that matter, God bless Smedley Butler for all the things that he said way back in the day. But it's like, yeah, we there's got to come a point to where it's like we say no, we start divesting, and we start to do that. And I think to some degree, and I'll put a little hope on this, I think we are starting to see, some people start to gravitate towards that disposition. And there is hope in that. And I think you're starting to see some of even the younger generations that are starting to step back and evaluate everything that's going on. And they're like, you know what? We don't want to be a party to this. We don't want to be involved in this. And really, that's where, that's where it starts to kind of culminate, right? And I think it's our posterity and our future that if we don't start to do something right now, then they are the ones that are going to probably get it worse down the road. And in the very least, we should at least hold the line, if not try to do something that's going to make it more feasible for them in the future. So I'll give you some closing remarks, and then we'll wrap it up here, Rebecca.
Yeah, I mean, when I mentioned before, we have a family, we have kids, and that's exactly how I feel about this now. Is that I don't want to leave the legacy for them and just like kick the can down the road so that they have to deal with it, or my grandchildren have to deal with it, like when they start coming. And I have a big family.
Yeah.
We have 12 kids. So like I am deeply invested in the future. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And I want what's best for them. I can see the government and all of these moving pieces on the very clearly on where this is headed if people don't do something. And here's, I guess, I don't like to give a problem to people without a way to do something about it. But we need doers. We need people, 100%. Get in touch with me. Like I know that, third party culture is kind of, it's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work to do. And what I'm really asking of people is to get involved and, don't set your expectations too high.
Yes.
Because we are going to have a lot of losses before we ever get a win. Yeah. But in the meantime, I don't think there's just not an alternative for me to do nothing.
Yeah.
Like I have to do something.
Yes.
Despite all the losses, the discouragement along the way, because this is a long, lonely road, like when you're doing this kind of stuff, this is, it can feel too big very quickly.
Yeah.
So getting together with people that are like-minded and see things the way that you and I see them. But we need people that are willing to get in and just, jump in and see this through, even with all the challenges and the hurdles and all of that kind of stuff. We have are going to be doing some strategizing for next legislative session on and because the House representatives are voted in every 2 years, so this is their second year on their current term, which means that some of them, especially people that are in seats that are they're not sure of their seats, we have more leverage basically. And then there's been a lot of changeover, even in like the last 6 months.
Yeah.
In Minnesota, if it's, people that have died, gone to jail, literally, like,
if
yeah. So there's been a lot of changeover. And so what we're going to not even sure what we're going to be faced with the next legislative session. But what I do know is that no matter what it is, we need to be prepared to face it and be adaptable on the ground, and have the the willingness to be able to pursue whatever it is for the good. Because if we don't do it for the good, they're going to do it for the bad, and they're absolutely going to roll over us in the process.
100%.
So that's what I'm looking for on people for our team, is just the doers. And that's a rare breed of person, but that's what we're looking for. So if somebody's listening and they're like, oh, that could be me, what can I do? Reach out, let's get you plugged in someplace and see where that is. But particularly for people who are, they're self-propelled, because a lot of this is going to just be like on people as individuals, be like, hey, this is where I can help, and this is where I'm just going to jump in, and this is what I'm going to do. And then knowing that they'll have, the backing and support. So not having to do it necessarily alone. So. Yeah.
And, if there's just real quick, where are some places that people can find the LP, and if they want to get involved? I know there's a website, obviously, but there's a couple different social medias as well.
Yeah, we have a Twitter or X account. I mean, somebody could reach out there and message. We have a website, LPMN.org. The email address for just general information, and then our treasurer Joey is generally who reads it, and then he'll forward it to whoever it pertains to. But that email address is info@lpmn.org.
Okay.
We're on Facebook. Social media right now is something that we're kind of struggling with, because it's oftentimes when you do this kind of work, you have a small team of people who wear a lot of hats.
Right.
So, that's we're not unique in that. If anybody feels like we have social media team, we do have a podcast. We try to do it once a week, but sometimes life happens. And then we have, if you want to run for a seat, like if you're, like I want to do this in this district, being a candidate gives you a certain platform, and willing, allows people to recognize you, and makes people more willing to listen to you about certain issues. And having a libertarian into a race forces the entire race to evolve to those libertarian talking points. So even if we don't win, which likely is probably not going to happen, correct. But having a libertarian in that race forces the conversation to change. And we talk about things that other people just won't discuss. Central banks, economics, the war machine, all of these things that other people, they're not even going to discuss it, but we will. And because we discuss it, they have to address it. So that's one of the powers of third party. But if somebody wants to run a race, campaign, we have resources, and we can help out with that. So
awesome.
Look towards that in the future. Definitely.
What I'll do is I'll try and plug as many things as I can for you in the description below when I go through and do some editing. That way, if people are interested, there'll be at least some links ready in the description below for them to be able to easier access that too. Otherwise, if you guys heard all that and you wrote some of it down, again, reach out. I'm sure they're more than willing to be willing to talk with you and get to know you and hopefully have you as an integral part of it, even if it's not about being libertarian, but just being involved in your community, like get involved. And because defending liberty takes all of us, and we have to be involved. We don't really have a choice, I feel, if we actually want to see things change and find the desired outcomes that we would like. And it's the same thing. I'll do a plug here too, also for the American Liberty Caucus. There is a website for the American Liberty Caucus that I will plug. There's an X account as well. And I'm trying to think of a few others, but I'll have all of the links in the description below for you guys to be able to look at these resources, hopefully get involved. We'll get everything, out to you guys so that way you can check and see where you want to go. So Rebecca Whiting, thank you so much. And I would absolutely love to have you back on in the future, especially to cover an episode about just agriculture and farm. It seems like that was a huge point for a lot of people this evening. And I'm sure they would very much welcome it, as would I. You're a wealth of knowledge from the farming all the way to the politics and the warfare state, as it were. And if you have just a couple moments, I'll talk with you after the show.
Sure, for sure. Thank you. I enjoyed this a lot, so thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. It's a great privilege to be able to have you here. And for everybody, I will have updates hopefully out by Sunday, Monday-ish, as to what to expect for next Thursday and Saturday. So stay on the lookout for that. I'll do the best I can to update everything and get that stuff out to you. I did find out that YouTube has a fancy little post option now that I started to play around with. So if you don't have an Instagram, if you're not on the Telegram channel for updates and the conversation that continues there, I will try and get some updates more regularly posted on the actual YouTube channel itself. So that way you have an idea of roughly what to expect for the upcoming episodes. So with that being said, thank you everybody for coming out and sitting down and having this conversation on the Sentinels of Liberty. Thank you again, Rebecca Whiting, for coming out and having this conversation and being a wealth of knowledge. I really look forward to having you back again soon. And with that being said, look, the flame of liberty and the torch has to be carried by each and every one of us. It's not only just for us, but for our future and our posterity. So go forth, create a little havoc, and make the difference that you want to see. Good night, and have a good rest of your weekend.